Welcome students to Session Zero University. My name is Professor Rainier, one of the many teachers here at the university, but for right now, I am your orientation representative. Here at SCU, you will find a variety of professors well-versed in the realms of tabletop role-playing games, offering you their insight on every facet of TTRPGs. Perhaps you'd like to take a homebrewing class with our potions professor, or join in on a role-playing class put on by our theater department. Be sure to take all your required general education classes like Character Creation 101, Intro to World Building, and NPC Voices for Beginners to help round out your education. There are also plenty of electives and intramural opportunities to add some fun and diversity into your everyday schedule. So get out there and learn. Whether you're hoping to graduate with a degree in DMing or playing It Matters Not, there's always room to grow at Session Zero University.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Session Zero University special series here at Session Zero Heroes. Today is an extra special episode where I'm going to be sitting down with long-term TTRPG content creator Chip Watchorn, and he is going to be talking to us all about his experience with cartography for TTRPGs, map making, filling those maps, everything like that. So it'll be really exciting for those of you out there that are interested in creating maps for your own games to see how somebody who's been doing it for a long time does it, and maybe some tips and tricks along the way. So, Chip, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll do what I can. It's hard to talk about map making without also hitting on world building a little bit. And I know you recently did a podcast on world building, so I'm not planning on getting into it too much, but like I said, it's kind of hard to talk about one without the other.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you got to create stories and stuff within your locations and within your map. So yeah, we'll definitely do that. So Chip, just kind of starting off from the beginning, how did you first get into map making when it comes to TTRPGs? What really sparked that interest and what got you going with that?
I don't know exactly. I've always liked maps. When I was a kid, I used to have just maps open and play little fantasy games in my head of, with armies on the maps that I was just, messing around with. But, when we started playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid, it was, I sort of morphed into one of the main people that was running games, in my group. And, we needed maps, so I just started drawing them, and it was by hand at first.
Wow, nice.
And so that's just basically how it started.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really cool to see those like hand-drawn maps. It's just mind-blowing to see like the detail and the artistic capability that people have. So,
well, I don't know that I had that much artistic capability, but they were maps.
They were maps.
I actually still have some of my old, some of the stuff from 25, 30 years ago.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and I'm sure everybody appreciated too having some visual opportunity within the D&D campaigns.
Yeah, a lot of what we did back then was, theater of the mind. When we first started playing Dungeons and Dragons, it was pretty much exclusively theater of the mind, although we would try to map out dungeons right, as you're going through them.
Yeah. So did you focus a lot more on dungeon stuff at back then, or was it a mix of dungeons and like full world maps, or what was kind of the...
When we first started playing, it was mostly, you were mostly just running...
dungeon crawls and...
Yeah. And, you would say, well, we're going back to town and, wherever that was at.
Sure.
But yeah, it was mostly dungeon crawls.
Yeah. Absolutely. So,
for our group anyway.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. So with your opinion, when it comes to map making within TTRPG stuff, how does it add to the experience? How would you say that it adds to the experience, or how has it added to the experience in games that you've run, or how can it add to the experience?
Well, it really depends on what you put on the paper, but I think it's easier to help people visualize distances and particularly nowadays when there's much more of a focus on using miniatures, and then, having, battle maps, those things it's so much nicer to have because you have a lot less arguments with players. Well, that's not where I was standing,
Right,
or
right.
that
No, I wanted to be closer.
Yeah,
or, well, I wanted to be
that's
outside
where
of
your
his.
guy is. It's right there.
Yep, exactly. No, that's a good point. And with battle maps for sure.
Yeah. So in that direction, I think it is certainly enhanced play, and it's a lot more black and white when you can see it on paper. Although it also takes away maybe some of the imagination.
Sure, that's true. Yeah, when you kind of put things into perspective of just like a 2D on paper. I can see how that would pull away from the imagination because you get a little bit too focused, especially when it comes to battles on like, I'm trying to strategically, I got to be this many squares, or if you use like the polygon shapes away from this dragon, because if he spews another fire, it's going to be a cone this big, and so I can see how that could kind of take away a little bit, but also, like you said, reduces arguments of where you were or where people their abilities would be hitting or not be hitting or whatever the case. So let's starting from the kind of the beginning of the process. When you make a map, where do you start? Is it something that I kind of need to get into my campaign planning a little bit first and then go to maps, or should I use maps as kind of a stepping stone to kind of help me plan my campaign? Where do you usually begin?
It really depends on what I'm doing. I've made several different worlds. I've started with a village.
Oh, okay.
I've started a world with just a village and a general idea of what was around that village and where they were going to. And those are the only spots I really started with. And I have started with a whole world, not just a continent, a whole world that had all of the continents, at least the outlines of the continents mapped. And it really, like I said, it really depends on what you want to do. I mean, you're a lot more free when you start smaller because you're not locked into whatever you've already done.
Absolutely.
And it really depends on the demands of my players. If I'm running a campaign that has players with multiple races, you got to figure out where did they all come from.
That's a very good point.
And so a lot of times I'll get input if I have some ideas like that. I'll get input from my players and say, listen, give me a little background on your character. Now, I don't like, I don't want a 5-page
right
backstory. If you write one, great. But I just want to, hey, my character came from here and this is why, or something like that. I've had people say, well, I don't really have much of a backstory. And then I'm like, all right, well, then you're going to be from this town.
I'm going to decide your backstory.
You're going to be from this town and you're going to be friends with this other guy because he's also from that town.
Perfect.
So,
and it kind of creates connection with your players,
right,
and that helps the party.
And it also gives you ideas on what you have to develop to begin with.
Right.
Because if you have a guy that comes from a dwarven kingdom and another guy that comes from an elven kingdom, and they're both, not right next to where everybody else is at, then you have to have something. You don't have to develop the whole thing, but you have to have a little bit of background information on, this is where it was at least, because unless they got plucked out of there and have no idea of, and I've seen campaigns start like that, unless they got plucked out of wherever they were at and don't know how to get back there or don't know where they're at in the world, then, you have to have some kind of a relationship with where things are at.
Exactly. Somebody from the elven village has probably been to the dwarven or vice versa, or whatever the case. There's a relationship there, or maybe a lack of relationship there. And then you can stem off of that as the DM. So,
and my style when I'm building things, I typically do more of a, I guess you would say, earth-like physical properties and things like that. You have to certainly take into account, I know they mentioned it on your world building thing, whether, when you do political borders and things like that, you take a look at the geography, because that's how it was decided. And, before modern travel and everything, political borders really were mountains and rivers and oceans, because that was a big physical barrier. Now, in your world, if, flying or something like that is ridiculously common,
that's a good point.
It makes those borders much more negligible.
That's a good point.
I've always, I've always leaned towards, the natural, like geopolitical stuff when I'm doing, borders and on things like that. So, mountain ranges, things like that become the areas that you're stopping at.
Yeah, absolutely. Region.
But I've also, my world building, I tend to have, you wouldn't necessarily call it low fantasy, and I've played in Forgotten Realms and I've played in, a lot of other commercials. I don't think I have ever had a place where somebody could go into a town and go into a shop and buy magic items. It's just never been that common in any of my stuff.
Got it. Okay.
Now, that's not to say that somebody couldn't develop that, but it's just, it's more like, I don't know, Lord of the Rings kind of magic style where people know it's out there, but it's, and again, this, try to relate this back to world building, it really lends itself more to more Earth-like, because you don't have any giant magical things that you have to contend with that, break all of those rules.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can kind of create a almost more accessible enemy, right? Where like a big bad, right? It's some individual managed to get their hands on one of those very rare magical artifacts, and now they're causing all kinds of chaos and havoc because they have something that is not accessible. There's not enchanters out there that are just mass producing these magical weapons all over the place. But I like that's a really good point. And tip for those that are trying to get into map making, right, is kind of having this understanding of, especially if we look back like in medieval times, right, how are they establishing this is the extent of the township, this is the extent of the settlement or city or whatever the case. And like you said, using those natural areas, those natural like sort of regional borders that you can kind of use to create a little bit of limitation within those towns, right? Keeping it and making rules and such that would apply to it, I guess you could say. So,
and when you're designing worlds that relate much more closely to Earth, people accept it.
Right.
It's a lot more acceptable. Now, if you can have rivers that run uphill if you want.
Sure.
I would suggest you have a reason for it.
Right.
And
people understand like the natural laws, right? We see it every day when we're walking around. So it helps to kind of put your players into perspective of things, to use those rules. And like you said, you can go outside of those. Why? What's the reason? And that kind of helps you create all kinds of, again, world building elements and things like that.
When I look at stuff like continents and I start looking at placing mountain ranges and things like that, I actually think back to when I took geography in high school and college and, plate tectonics and things like that. Mountain ranges tend to run in, where plates are getting pushed together and maybe there's volcanic activity or, where plates are coming apart or, things like that. I that's what I think of in my mind because I want it to be something that when people look at it, they're like, oh yeah, I get it.
That makes sense. It's logical.
Yeah.
I think that's great. Yeah, absolutely.
When you look at, I love J.R.R. Tolkien, but when you look at the map of Middle Earth, he drew it, but I don't know that he had anything in mind like that when he drew it.
Sure.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
It's just, that's my own personal thing is I tend to look at the logic of things and how they work together or work apart. And I also think of, when you're placing forests or deserts, a lot of times you have deserts on one side or another of a mountain range simply because all the moisture is pushed out of it before it gets to one side or the other.
The laws of nature.
Yeah. And those are the kind of things that I look at. And there are exceptions to those rules, and sometimes they're magical exceptions. But, when you're looking at placing all of those major things, and then rivers, I typically try to place them where it, when you look at a map where it looks like you think they should go, after you get everything drawn out.
Mountain runoff that leads down and then ideally goes into a larger body of water. Right. Things along those lines.
And then when you're placing settlements, you have why are they there? Are they out in the middle of nowhere because... Why? Yeah. There has to be some accessibility. Either there's trails or there's roads or there's rivers. And back, I always think of medieval times. A lot of things were along some kind of a waterway because that was the fastest way to move things.
Absolutely. And you need water to survive too.
Right. And in a magical world, you can have other things.
Yeah.
But, I look at those kind of things when I'm placing settlements and all of that. So.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's logic to it. So if nothing else from this episode, if there's nothing else that you take away from it, it's for those out there that are in school, pay attention in your geography class, and that'll help you a long ways when it comes to creating your maps and creating your cartography for your campaigns, because there's a lot that you can garnish from that and garnish from reality that can help inspire things within your campaign.
Yeah. And like I said before, you can break any of those rules. And, because of some magical thing. But when your players ask you, why is this like this? Have a reason for it.
Absolutely.
Or you could just say, well, nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
You know what? That's something you're going to make up because they asked.
That's a good point. And it opens up opportunity for them to be like, well, let's explore this. I want to figure out, is there a magical stone underneath this waterfall that causes it to go up instead of down? Let's get a hold of that. That sounds powerful, So yeah, absolutely. And speaking of which, when it comes to your players, you've mentioned this before where you can use their backstories as an opportunity to kind of help you build your map. Are there other opportunities or other ways that you might use players to kind of help develop the world as they go along?
Yeah, I've, mostly it's through the backstory thing. But if they have some idea of, a little more of an idea of, well, what kind of a society is, your characters at an elf, what kind of a society was it a traditional elven society or was it something different?
Yeah, maybe it's more kind of like we see the elves in Lord of the Rings where they have these like big spires and they've built all of this, ornate stuff. Or is it more of like a wood elf type thing where they live in a more natural environment amidst the trees, things along those lines?
I had one time I had an idea for an elven society that was really based on feudal Japan. I didn't rob so much of it that they thought it was feudal Japan, but that's kind of how I based everything off of. And, when you're looking at placing societies, you also ask yourself, what are their strengths? What resources do they have available to them from the maps that you're making? So, like I said before, there's got to be a reason that they're where they're at.
Yes, absolutely.
And that reason has to be something on the map.
Yep. That's right. Absolutely. I like how you mentioned the feudal Japan too, because it also suggests take inspiration from history, right? Pay attention in your history class. I know there's a lot of authors out there. George R.R. Martin, who did all the Game of Thrones stuff, he talks about how a lot of the characters in there are inspired by past figures from various history. You've got one of my favorite authors, Brian Jacques from Redwall. He did all the Redwall stuff. He's talked about how a lot of his characters are inspirations from either like historical, biblical stuff, things along those lines, which is really cool. So yeah, absolutely. Use history, use kind of some of the conflicts. People fight over land. Why are they fighting over land? That can help you inspire a little bit of your map making too. What this area's been taken over by this group or something like that. And how has that affected things in the meantime?
Yep.
So
yeah, because just like modern day, I mean, every society has resources that they're willing to fight for, and those resources are typically natural resources that are available to them. Do these dwarves have a silver mine that the orcs want, or do they have whatever? Those are the kind of resources that you're looking for, or is it some kind of a magical crystal that they're mining? Yeah. Which again, you can make up whatever you want.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Just there just has to be something there that you may have a random small settlement. Right. Because, hey, they started, cutting down lumber here, and they just figured, let's just start processing it here too, and so they have a small village there.
Sure.
And it focuses primarily on lumber.
Yeah.
But
there's a resource associated with it, which is logical, right? Like you had mentioned before, having the river, it makes it easier to transport things. And then on the other hand, it's also, great for survival. And you can there's a silver mine. We know we've been in this mine. We found silver. We're going to mine it. That's a valuable resource. So we're going to stick around here and we're going to mine this silver. So yeah, I like that. There's logic to there's a resource logic to that. Of course, like we said before, you've got people that might want the resource somebody else has. So that starts a conflict. That's an opportunity to start to create story and world build as well. So
yeah, and sometimes it can be something as simple as, well, we have an inn here because, you know what, it's halfway between, it's a 2-day journey from this place to that place, and this is halfway in between, and there aren't a whole lot of resources there at all, but the inn is successful because...
Sure. It's the halfway point.
It's the halfway point.
Absolutely. People want to stop and rest, and then they'll continue
and
on the
then
next day.
you might have a few supporting services because of that.
Right. Absolutely. So there's a lot of opportunity to sort of take one point and say, this is something that's here, answering why it's here, and then kind of following that up with what else needs to be here for that to make sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's dive into the creating the map itself. So what are some of the favorite tools or techniques or whatever the case that you use, whether that be like I prefer to do it on pen and paper or maybe even digital resources that you like to use?
Like I said before, I started just doing pen and paper, and I still have some of those. But I started using digital tools. I'll be honest with you. I think I bought Campaign Cartographer in... I want to say it was about 2001. So I've been using that for a long time. And that was their first edition of it. And I've tried a couple of other tools. I tried, I think, Dungeon Draft and Incarnate.
Oh, okay.
And they're fine. They're frankly, they're easier to use. I mean, a lot of the newer tools are more point and click. Campaign Cartographer has a steep learning curve, and a lot of people don't like it because of that. But if you put some time in, I'm on the 3rd edition, Campaign Cartographer 3, and I now have every resource that they have available. And the amount of styles that are available for you that you don't have to design on your own are just, it's ridiculous, the amount of stuff that they have in there.
Absolutely.
You can use it. With that, you can make anything from a fantasy world to spaceships, whatever you want. And I don't know. I like it. I'm not by any means, a professional with it. I just have a decent understanding of how it works. And it, honestly, if I'm away from it from too long and then go back to it, I have to spend some time, reorganizing myself and kind of, relearning. Oh yeah, I need to do this.
It's like riding a bicycle. If you stop doing it for like a whole year and then you come back to it the next summer and you're like, man, I gotta refeel this out and get used to it again. But
that's what I primarily use now is Campaign Cartographer 3.
Okay, that totally makes sense. With anything that's got more customization to it and more capability to it, there's going to be a steeper learning curve because you're going to have to figure out how all that works. So.
And one thing I should mention, when you're looking at different, I like to do a lot of writing too. And so I do that based on, the worlds that I'm building.
Because you do want to write along while you're designing the map. Because I want to know, like, if I'm making this city here, what does it do? Because I need to be able to reference that. Otherwise, my players are going to be like, hey, this is a cool city. Let's go here. What are they all about? And you're like, oh, I don't remember.
Yeah. And the tools you're using to make those maps, you want to own. You want to own that simply because, do I have a fantasy that someday it might be published? Yeah, I do, but it's not realistic. But
you never know.
But I would love to have some of my stuff published. However, some of those tools that some of them require monthly subscriptions. Some of them require and some of them whatever you make up, you don't actually own.
Right.
So that's something to look at when you're looking at purchasing one. And that's part of the reason I use what I use, because whatever you make is yours.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yep. And
absolutely.
now, sometimes you can find deals on it. They've been running a humble bundle deal on that they I've seen them do something similar before, but not to the extent that this one was.
Right.
There's no way you're ever going to get that much stuff for the prices that they were asking on Humble.
$35 or something like that. Yeah.
I actually used it to get, there were several annuals that I hadn't purchased yet, and I did not have the Cosmographer, which is a program that goes along with it that will put your world on a planet in a star system.
Oh.
I didn't have that because I was doing fantasy stuff, and I didn't really need that.
Sure.
Yeah, for $35, I bought everything that I still didn't have, because mostly those annuals, I subscribe to the annuals every year, and it's about $35 for one annual.
Just
every
one,
year.
yeah, absolutely. And then there's the software too, cost I think a good like $40 or so. So
yeah, normally that stuff, I paid full retail for most of the stuff. And it's a lot of money. But again, if if you're patient and you wait around, you can find good deals on some of that stuff. But my recommendation is use what you're comfortable with. Just know what you're getting into, because you don't want to get into something and design this fantastic world and then find out, hey, I can publish it. And then all of a sudden, oh, this company wants a piece of it because it's not actually yours.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely make sure to check the terms of service, be able to understand like exactly how it all works and what's yours or what's pre-created assets that you can or cannot publish in your own name and things like that. So yeah, that is always kind of the tricky and scary thing. I know people like on Reddit will ask all the time, like, is this mine? Can I use this? Can I publish this? Can I make money off of it? And then of course everybody gives the response of, well, just to clarify, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't technically give you the correct answer here. And so, yeah, it's always kind of a bit of a mess. But yeah, if you check their terms, obviously you should be able to discern whether or not. And ironically, a lot of those more complicated, more customizable services are usually, and obviously more expensive, are usually the ones that you own full rights to anything that you create, which is always, good. That's always what we're looking for. So I guess for anyone out there that's trying to make their first map, they listen to this episode and they're really inspired and they say, okay, I've got a campaign coming up that I'm working on. I'm going to make my first map. What tips or tricks would you recommend to them?
I would say you honestly start small. Start with wherever your players are starting out, and don't make any more than you absolutely have to, unless you really have a great idea of, well, this is the way I want it to be, because your players are going to change things.
Right.
And
yes.
Anybody who's ever mastered a game will tell you that your players are going to change things, and they're going to want to go places that you didn't want to go. Now, you can have ideas for adventures and even have adventures ready and just pop them in where they're convenient. Oh, you know what? They're going to go over here. Well, this would be a good place to put that dwarven mine thing that I wanted them to run into. And now they're going to run into it because, hey, guess what? They're walking right by it.
That's right. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let the players kind of guide. But yeah, pre-write some stuff, but don't slap it into a specific spot and say, this is where this is going to happen, because yeah, you can bust it out whenever you need it. Have the map be kind of a living document that's being created on the spot. We've talked a lot about kind of world building and how the map can affect the world building, which is really good. What are some ways that you can kind of create maybe some hidden clues or secrets within your map that might intrigue your players? Maybe like a location that doesn't already have something associated with, but something that you can kind of draw your players in and then create further.
Oh, yeah. I make player handouts all the time. And, sometimes they're a rougher version of a map that I have, or really those are the only things I use typically that will do that, unless you plant a story hook and and they're wondering where that's at, and then you're like, well, according to local rumors, it might be over in this area,
right,
or
right.
That's what I've done with it.
Yeah. So when you give them these handouts, what would all be kind of included on that?
Depends on who they get it from, and
so you're saying like in game,
yeah,
they like,
yeah.
Okay, very
depends
cool.
on who they get it from, and I'm not going to give them something where everything is named on it, and you know what? Sometimes they're not exactly right. They might have stuff in there, depending on the ability of the map maker that gave it to them. It might not be a 2-day journey. It might be a 4-day journey, or it might,
Or you could say, like with elves, maybe they're known to be faster or something like that. It's like, to them, it was a 2-day journey, but for your group, it ends up being a week-long expedition.
Or you know what? Something, there could have been a natural catastrophe that wiped out a road between here and there. And,
sure.
And so you got to find your way. So, it really depends on what purpose are you giving it to them for.
Sure.
This lends itself well to putting them into places that you kind of wanted them to go without them feeling like they're getting railroaded.
Exactly.
Because they don't necessarily know what the terrain is going to look like. They might think they do.
Right.
Because they're looking at a map that was given to them. But, they get to a certain point and you you tell them what's on the map or what they're seeing, and it's not what's on the map. So then they start having questions. Well,
absolutely.
Why isn't this right? Well, I don't know. It maybe
or like you said, like there's a natural disaster. Like you can see exactly why it's not right anymore.
Right. Well, it looks like there was a big flood.
Yep. Now you got to figure what are you going to do?
Landslide, whatever. Yeah,
I like that. That's a really because, like you said, DMs always use railroading is always kind of like a curse word almost when it comes to DMing, but you can railroad in such a way that doesn't feel at all like railroading. You're not the DM saying, all right, so you guys go to the next city. And they're like, well, I didn't know we weren't even done here. Or there were other things that we wanted to do or whatever. Like, that's the bad railroading, right? I'm just going to slap you guys into this next location because I want to move things along or whatever the case. But yeah, sort of using in-game, in-world situations that kind of manipulate them into these different twists and turns that you want them to take. That's where like the real skill, the dungeon mastering is.
And you can use things, props for that.
Yeah.
Roll some dice. Oh, hey, there was a landslide here, and, maybe you'd already planned it, but rolling dice makes it look like it's random.
It's also a good point. Yeah, absolutely.
But, those kind of things you just throw in there when you need to.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a really good, that's a key tip right there. That's just DMing tip. Fantastic DMing tip right there. So what about when it comes to things like simulating travel and kind of doing the scaling of a map and things like that? I mean, I guess that probably goes into, well, how far do they want to go or anything like that? But when it comes to sort of that journeying aspects or going from one place to another, how do you kind of make that interesting, that in-between time?
Overland stuff can be kind of a slog depending on what you're doing. I ran some people through I can't think of the name of it. You're going through an island for a lot of your journey, and the mechanics that they have are really pretty good about they have weather built in, and what happens there. There's chances that you might get lost, and you're as a DM you're keeping track where they're actually at on the map, and they're keeping track of where they think they're at.
Okay.
And those kind of things can add some random stuff in there. You keep them when you're going all the way across country. It's not just, well, we spent 15 days doing this and nothing happened, because things are going to happen. You're going to, all right, how are you getting food? How are you,
Yeah. Probably one of the most neglected things that DMs have a tendency to forget about is, how are you eating and drinking as you need? The survival stuff.
And I don't know, I haven't done a lot of the overland stuff, but if you intersperse smaller, I guess you'd call them one-shots, or just, smaller combat or interactions or whatever within those that you have ready to go, it livens that stuff up quite a bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So in a situation where you had a full map, right, maybe of the continent that they're on or an island or something along those lines, how do you kind of mitigate an idea of the players are able to look down, they see the map, they see everything that's on it, versus, well, this is what your characters are now, right? Like the metagaming of it. How do you kind of juggle that idea?
I don't know. I guess I really don't worry about it too much.
Sure.
The people I've played with, mostly they don't tend to get too locked up in the mechanics of their characters and how everything is working. They're just going by what you're feeding them. But there certainly are situations where where the person may know something. Like, for example, if you're running, Forgotten Realms stuff, well, it's fair to expect that the guy playing the character knows a lot more about the Forgotten Realms than their character does.
Right.
However, you're just going to have to deal with it the best you can.
Whenever they pitch an idea or something like that, you're gonna be like, well, how would you know that? Would you know that? Are you sure? Kind of thing. So, or maybe it's a situation of like, you don't know that, but you might know somebody that might be able to give you more details, which would lead you to understand things a little bit more. Yeah, it's always kind of a tricky thing. I know some people, of course, use like the fog of war, where even if you have like a physical map or something like that, digital is really easy. I know they put that in just about any where you can play online. Pretty much every map you can do some kind of a cool fog of war effect. But even in a physical map, you can just, take some pieces of black construction paper or something and set it out so that they can't see particular sections, and that can kind of help mitigate a little bit. But of course, you have that situation where maybe this player knows about this place and nobody else necessarily does, and he hasn't talked to the other players about it yet. So it's like, do I block it out with the fog of war, or do I just kind of leave it open, or I don't know, something along those lines. But I mean, I guess it's a kind of case by case basis too.
Yeah.
Whatever. And
again, are they working from a map that you gave them that was part of something that they got in game? And like I said, sometimes those maps aren't terribly accurate. It kind of depends on what you're doing.
Sure. It'd actually be kind of a neat mechanic to do, to give each player a blank just outline, kind of like what we have here with the coffee stain map. And then you take like almost like cut out pieces of paper and put some tape on, like 2-sided tape on it, and work like stickers. And then they would stick on, here are things that I know about based on my character. And each player's, of course, would be a little bit different. And then when they go into town and they, ask for some information, they get like handouts, kind of like you said. And those could come with more stickers, because it's like, oh, now you know that this exists over here, or at least you think it does, or something like that. That'd be kind of I might have to keep that in mind, because that'd be kind of a
that'd
fun.
be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or you could even just give them pieces of the real, your map, just at a time.
Yep, absolutely. So then they all have one big one, because I mean, they're a party after all. So
and it depends on the people you're playing with. So, I've played with people who, honestly, I know I've played with groups before that nobody really wanted to map.
Oh, sure.
And, somebody got stuck with it, and, they're just doing it because they don't want to get lost in the dungeon or whatever, And so it really depends on, you got to feel your group out and plan accordingly, because if it's going to be something that they don't enjoy, then obviously, you don't want to do it just because, well, you want it to be realistic or whatever for them. It's, in the end, it's got to be a fun game.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. We've all got like one player that we all know we can trust to take notes and everything else. And then you've got like the entire rest of the players who they just want to like go kill stuff or whatever the case. And they don't really care that much. But yeah, that's always kind of a tricky toss up. Were there any, just kind of along the way of your journey within cartography within TTRPGs, were there any particular fictional maps that really inspired you to want to get into it and to make the maps that you've made?
Yeah. I mean, if you look up there above my desk, I have
absolutely
a huge map of Middle Earth up there. I still have the original set, the very first world that I bought, World of Greyhawk.
Oh, okay. Sitting right there on the shelf.
Yep. I still have that.
Nice.
Now, this isn't my original set, because my original set, I used carpet tape to tape it to my bedroom wall.
Oh, okay.
And it did not come off well.
No, it's not meant to.
My mom wasn't very happy about that.
I bet. But that's cool. Like, yeah, that's the classic.
So I still have it. I still have the original books, and I did get another the map back. I bought it off of eBay, but those things were all inspirational, as well as I've read a lot of fictional, fantasy. That's kind of my guilty pleasure. And
absolutely.
I love to see fantasy books that have a map in them.
Right.
Now, there are some series that I really like that have no maps, and it's on purpose, because the author, they've even asked the author about, if you've ever read the Black Company series, there's no maps in that.
Right.
They talk about things, and they even asked the author about it, and he did that on purpose. He did not put a map in there on purpose, because what it come down to is he didn't want people coming back to him later and asking him a bunch of questions about why didn't they do this, or because this is what the map says. And,
right.
I certainly respect that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it, in a certain ways, it does constrain you. Once you have a map and that's
You're
your
locked
map,
in.
you can change things. I mean, there can be natural disasters or unnatural disasters or whatever. But one time I wanted to change this has been a long time ago. I had a basic world that my group was adventuring in, and I really wanted to change some stuff in it. And so what happened was they had found this powerful artifact, and they decided that they wanted to use this teleportation circle at the, there was a very limited number of them in the world that I had, and they decided they wanted to take this powerful artifact through this teleportation circle. And I thought, well, there's my opportunity. They screwed up the whole, it screwed up a lot of things, and they ended up like 1,000 years in the future.
What?
And it was still a fantasy setting, but all of the geopolitical stuff had changed. Some of the terrain had changed, and I brought in the new map that I really wanted to use.
That's amazing.
I never told them that's why that's why that
the magics didn't mix.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's a key opportunity right there. That's kind of fun. And they have no idea. They don't know anything now.
No, it was their fault. They shouldn't have taken that artifact through that that portal.
Absolutely. That's another one of those.
I did one of those. Are you sure that's what you want to do?
And they were like, yes. Actions have consequences, and sometimes if you don't think through them, but it's also a unique opportunity for you, right? To get to run something else.
And if you want to change your maps, there's plenty of opportunities that the characters will give you. Right. That allow you to change things.
Absolutely. It comes back again to, use the choices your players make to change things. I always say that too, and it's a struggle for me for sure, which is don't overwrite when it comes to your campaign, because I know I am 100% guilty of got this whole big plan that's coming, and if there's one thing that our current series, Criminals of Alanumis, is teaching me, it's that kind of along what you're saying, which is use the players' decisions to kind of weave the story that you've created into what they're doing and where they're going, versus trying to force them to obviously go where you want them to.
When I've written a lot of stuff extensively for campaigns or things that I've done here in the last 10 years, most of it has been the history of how they got to whatever they got to, because it allows me to write stuff about that, because I really enjoy writing stuff for the campaign, but it also maintains that the present is fluid.
Right. Yes.
You're not writing all of the relationships that are right now, because you don't know that, until the players make some decisions. And some of it you have to make up as you go along. But, absolutely. But if you find yourself wanting to write more, a lot of characters do appreciate, hey, there's some history here. And when you can immediately tell them what it is, if you enjoy doing that sort of thing and writing those kind of things, then, by all means, use the maps and what were they fighting over? What were they, what was the cause of all of this? And write yourself some history.
Absolutely. And granted, with magic being kind of an element of it, or maybe some kind of sci-fi element, sometimes time manipulation can affect some of these things. But for the moment that they're there, you've got that background or that history to a situation that's not going to change unless they do something like that. But then you're going to figure it out with the players after that, right? If they're going to go back in time somehow with some artifact and change history, that's something that you'll have written out, and then you'll have them explore as they go into it. But yeah, absolutely. Write more background, write more history, and then you're going to be a lot more confident when they get to those spaces. So that makes a lot more sense. What's probably one of the most rewarding aspects of creating maps for your sessions?
I frankly like making maps and world building almost more than I actually like playing. And that's pretty obvious right now, because I don't have an active group right now. Sure. We've had, life things come up, and it's been probably a couple years since the group that I had been playing with has been active. But, I'm hoping to get something started again maybe this summer. We'll see how things go.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But I just enjoy the creative process of it.
Oh, absolutely. Building worlds and writing content and everything like that. It's getting ideas out onto the page and creating these crazy, awesome, amazing things.
Yeah, and I like I've written some short stories and stuff about some NPCs that I've made, just because it gives me an opportunity to flesh them out a little bit, and and it gives you a source of stories and rumors that you can feed your characters about different
things that are going on,
the different NPCs or the things going on in the world that you're in. Again, like I told you when we started, it's hard for me to separate the cartography out from the world building, because to me it's kind of goes hand in hand.
I think it should. Absolutely. I think it has to. Awesome. What, so just kind of final words here before we jump into our intramurals, but what would be your advice to experienced GMs who have never really messed with maps before, but they're thinking, I want to enhance the experience for my players. I think I want to try making maps for the first time. What kind of advice would you give them?
It depends on what you want to do. If you're an artistic person and you want to do it by hand, by all means, do it by hand. I prefer the digital stuff because, I can draw some basic things, but my digital stuff looks a lot better.
I'm the same way.
And really what it comes down to is what kind of an experience you want to have doing it. If you just want point and click stuff and you just want to do generic, if you're happy with having more generic stuff, then, you don't have to spend a ton of money.
Sure.
To get some of the online tools.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
there's some free ones out there.
Yep,
so you can jump right in.
There's a lot of them have trials. When I knew I was going to have this conversation with you, I started looking at some of the older stuff that I had tried different times online, and some of it has a monthly subscription with like a 14-day free trial or things like that, and take advantage of those things, see if it's something you're going to like doing. But again, some of those things, the campaign cartographer in particular does have a steep learning curve.
Sure.
And you just got to know that going into it, that it's not, you're going to have to put some time in, watching some videos and learning before you can just sit down and hammer something out.
Absolutely. Yeah, it kind of just depends on what level of commitment you want to put into making maps.
How much time do you have and how much do you enjoy it?
Right.
Exactly. That's what it comes down to.
And so, use those free or low cost options first. See if you kind of like the feel of it. And if you think, hey, I love this is really fun, maybe look at some of the more expensive and the more, professional level softwares and things like that. So awesome. Well, Chip, thank you so much for sharing this incredible expertise on everything map making, everything cartography when it comes to TTRPGs. And like you said a couple of times now, it really ties into the world building, and there's a really cool sort of ratio of the cartography helps the world building and the world building helps the cartography. It's really a hand-in-hand situation. So, and there were some fantastic tips and tricks in there too of creating the maps using geographical logic, things that we learn in school, things that we see in our everyday, and using that and helping us to inspire our cartography within our fantasy sessions. So thank you so much for being on the show, and we will jump over to our intramural game. All right, so welcome back to our intramural game. So today what I did was I found online this really nifty, I wanted to do something that was map making related, right? And as you know, for those listening, we usually play one of these intramural games. We try to keep it thematic to whatever the topic of the episode is. So I found this really cool sort of mini RPG called Cartograph. It is by Brandon Lee. You can find it on itch.io, and I can post the link for you there as well. But the idea behind it is that it's a TTRPG that's entirely centered around developing a map. You are playing as cartographers, and as you're developing the map, you're having kind of little mini adventures throughout where the locations that you're finding along the way. So looking over the rule set for this, which is actually a pretty impressive little booklet that you get, I figured we would do kind of like a mitigated mini version of this. We're not going to play through a whole TTRPG, but what we are going to do is create this map. So I did the old coffee method where I took a nice big 11 by 17 sheet of paper and I spilled some coffee on it and let it dry out, and then outlined what will essentially be our continent or island, maybe something along those lines. And we're going to take some turns. I guess we're going to do one turn each technically to kind of fill in this map a little bit. I'll be sure to take a picture of it and be able to post it on our socials. So if you're listening to this episode, you can be able to look at that once this comes out. So do you want me to go first?
Sure. Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
Sounds good.
If you could see this through the microphone, it actually looks pretty good.
I was pretty happy with how it turned out, for sure. So each player starts out with 3 biome dice and 1 landmark dice. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take all 4 dice and you just roll them onto the map. And I think we'll go one at a time. I guess I'm taking this side for the most part. And then based on what you rolled, you're going to get a prompt. So once the dice are rolled onto the map, you're actually going to use where they land as kind of your spot for whatever it is that you're going to put there. So we'll start with my biomes. So my first biome I rolled, is that a 1?
It's a 1.
It's a 1. Okay, perfect. So it's a 1 on the biome, which is a forest. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop over to the forest section of my booklet here. So the game creates a massive amount of tables to kind of help prompt.
That's something actually that's handy to have when you're trying to navigate things in your own world is, there are several different publishers who make books of tables for towns or inns or whatever. There's just tons of different ones.
Absolutely. So now that I'm at the prompts for forest, I will draw a card. And then from there, I take that card. It's a black jack. There we go. It is a black jack card. So I go over to the black forest prompts. I go down to jack, and it will tell me what a little prompt about my forest to kind of help me create a little bit of the world building that surrounds it. So this says sparse and grassy. Effigies mark these trees here. What message do they convey? What people created them? And then, of course, I get a benefit from that moving forward. So I'm going to take my pen. I'm going to draw like a little tree area here. I'm going to do something real simple.
Watching you draw these reminds me, I just saw something not too long ago that there's a company that came out with stamps for making your own world. So, little tree stamps and stuff like that. Yeah.
And it'll make it look nicer than I did by far.
No, I didn't mean that.
No, I know.
I'm just like, hey, that would actually be handy to have for playing this.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. It said there were effigies. So I'm kind of imagining almost like in Pocahontas where the trees have like faces carved in them.
Yeah. Or maybe totems.
Like totems. Yeah, kind of like totems. And I like the idea that they see kind of like the Ents of Lord of the Rings, right? These trees aren't just trees. These are like people. These are things that whoever the natives are in the area, maybe they're obviously very naturally driven. So maybe some kind of elves or something like that. Some sort of druidic group that sees these trees as sort of humanistic figures. And it's hard to say whether or not they carved them originally or if the trees sort of like grow these faces naturally. But one way or another, these trees are certainly more than just trees. So that's my forest. It also does have a section in here for names. I'm going to call it the bark face forest since they have faces. And I would say that this is probably more of like the other people when they come through this forest. That's what they call it. It's not the technical name or what have you. So next up on kind of the southern section of my map, I have a 5, and that is a same as closest biome. So it says
another forest, I guess, huh?
Be another forest, I guess. Yeah. So I will draw, I'm just going to do one tree here this time.
Okay.
Maybe it's a smaller forest. It is getting a little close to the coast, and usually things don't like the kind of salt water of the coast. So we're going to draw a card. It is a two of diamonds.
Yep.
So we'll go with red. So we have a 2 of diamonds. This one says, occupied and guarded. You see watchful eyes as you pass through the area. How do people here confront you for a forest? It's occupied and guarded. That's interesting. Why is it guarded? Who's guarding it? Why are they protecting these trees? I'm going to assume that, again, another druidic circle over here, and there's maybe a local settlement nearby, which just kind of goes into what you talked about, where you kind of start with a point and then you expand outwards into why things are the way they are. You have this group of druids, and they've dealt with some nearby settlers who have been chopping down their trees, and they're not super happy about that since they see nature as a very important element. It's not just a resource. So this group over here is not happy. I'm going to call this the Valential Forest. That's just something that came to mind. Not the best writing.
Sounds fine to me.
All right, so it's the Valential Forest that's being guarded by these druids. Apparently there's a lot of druids in this campaign.
Yeah.
This is kind of a very druid heavy. My last region or biome dice is a 3, which is a lake, which is interesting since it's right next door to the ocean here. So I'm going to say that the lake is right here. And maybe I should have looked at the prompt before I started drawing it, but we'll roll with that. There's probably a good likeliness that maybe water is probably coming into it from the coast, just from.
So it could have some salt water / fresh water.
It's like a saltwater lake. Yep, exactly. So then we jump over to lakes, which thankfully is right next door. I'm going to draw a card. We'll see what it is. We got a 5 of hearts, so that is a red. So red lake, 5 hearts. We got vessels pass by on the water frequently here. What makes this place so well traveled?
I mean, it'd be a natural harbor.
It would be a natural harbor, absolutely. I'm going to draw like a little ship here, and it says, "Why is it so well traveled?" Well, I would imagine there's got to be a big city. There's a big city right around here, so I'm going to call this right here is the settlement that I was talking about earlier. And I'm just gonna put a dot there, but this is an entire city that's kind of built around this lake. And I'll just put some houses here along the side.
What I find interesting about this is we haven't talked about a scale for this map.
That's true.
So I might have
drawn a really big city there.
Say, that city might be freaking huge.
That's a very good point. Awesome. And then finally, we have my landmarks, which I rolled. I rolled a 1, which is just nothing. There's nothing here.
My turn?
Absolutely. Go for it.
It matters where they fall, right?
Yep, that's right. Cool. Okay. Where do you want to start? Do you have a preference?
What does this mean, the 4?
4? Yeah, so that's your landmark dice. That'll actually be a city.
Okay, it's going to be probably, I would say, right on the point there,
maybe? On the point there. Okay, awesome. So we'll put, there's a city right about here.
All right, and that might be, a good point of trade. The reason it's there is because it's close to where the druids are.
Yep. And that settlement.
And they can ship stuff out from the other settlement there.
Absolutely. I can, let me get you a city prompt. If you want to draw a card.
Oh, yeah. 4 of hearts. So
4 of
red.
hearts. All right. So you've got a bustling merchant city. This fits.
Perfect.
Fits well. Bold colors and decorated buildings line the streets. What does the city trade in? What diverse people do you find here?
Well, it's going to be trading, I would say, probably in lumber from some of the locals, and it's also going to be probably trying to trade with some of the druids too, so maybe some foodstuffs, but I would say mostly lumber would probably be the resource, because you had mentioned that they were taking it out of the forest there.
Yep.
And it would trade with the other city that you have going on around the lake.
Around the lake. Awesome. Fantastic. You got a name for the city?
You know what? Let's just call it, something basic. We'll call it Druidville.
They got here and
how about Woodville? How about Woodville?
Okay.
Because it's probably not going to be a major city. It's just,
It's just for trading.
Yep.
Woodville.
And,
I like it.
Your city, was your city named?
No, I didn't name it. I forgot about that.
Maybe they're using that wood for building ships or something like that.
Sure. We'll call this Harbor Lake then, which I also forgot to name. And then we'll call this...
It depends on what you want to do. I mean, we could call it Harborville, but
Harborville with Harbor Lake.
Woodville.
You've got some people. The people that came to this town
are not particularly literate.
Yeah, which is scary, thinking that they're building ships, right? Awesome. All right, which one do you want to handle next?
What's this island up here?
Yeah, so that was a 5, which I believe that also, and that's your biome dice. So it says same as closest to biome.
Oh, well, we're going to have to determine one of these other ones first.
Okay, so we'll jump to one of the other ones for the moment.
Well, it's going to have to be the 2 here.
2. Ooh, you got to...
Because we have another 5.
Oh, okay. Ooh, this is going to be interesting. So 2 is actually mountains.
Oh, wow. There's a lot of mountains
up
here.
It said if you have 2 of the same, you can create a mountain range.
All right.
So we might just do that.
I'm going to say, it looks to me like there's going to be a mountain range going this way. And you know what? Actually, this map lends itself to it, because it points out here. And there's got to be a reason there's an island up there.
Right.
So there's a little mountain on the island.
Sure. Do you think maybe it's a volcano that's...
Why not?
Sure.
Your mountain range could come like this and
oh, sure.
And go that way.
Okay. So you've created kind of like a point, and then there's some hidden land kind of behind those mountains.
And so, yeah, I mean...
I like that.
That's what I would do. I mean, that takes care of all our dice, but it'd be a very large mountain range,
yeah, it would.
Probably.
Absolutely. You want to draw a card? We can get we'll get a little bit of information on these islands.
5 of diamonds.
5 of diamonds. All right. So it says ancient and dilapidated ruins of a long dead people litter these peaks. What story can you glean from their architecture? And you could do this for either one.
You know, this would be a great opportunity to rip off Skyrim. And, you know, the ancient Dwemer in Skyrim, you just name them something else and drop it in here.
Sure, absolutely. Take inspiration from anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, if they're mountains, if I was doing it, I would probably do some kind of a giant, like there used to be giants, and they've had quite a few dwellings throughout those mountains, and maybe giant home in over years. They in a lot of D&D stuff or RPG stuff, giants and dragons battled each other, and they are on the downswing. So there may be a few giants here and there, but most of their civilization lies in ruins throughout those mountains.
You got like surviving hermits almost in a sense. Very cool, very cool. So with that being said, I mean, what should we call this big giant sort of triangle of mountains here?
They've got to be big mountains, and they're going to be volcanic up there towards the top. Let's go with I don't know, Sky Range.
Ooh, the Sky Range, awesome. Anything in particular? Do you want to draw another card for that final one over there? That sort of island mountain?
We can, yeah. Jack of Spades.
Oh, Jack of Spades. All right. So this is for your mountain, or your island mountain. It says, colossal and timeless, the peak of this mountain stretches high above. What do you spy hidden at its peak?
You know what? That'd be a great place for the ruined giant city. Maybe it was their capital, and it just lies in ruins, and it's a source of like local legend, and it's pretty much, nearly impossible to get to.
Oh, absolutely. Kind of. But not for a giant.
Right.
But for the normal, even for a giant, I think there'd be a challenge. It's a big mountain you got to go up, even compared to them. So very cool, very cool. What would the capital of a giant city be called?
How about...
Oh, I almost said Bigsville, but that's kind of just goofy.
Yeah, if we're going to continue with the same theme. Guggenheim or something like that.
Guggenheim.
Yeah.
I like that. I will do my best to spell.
I hope that's not a German swear word or something, but
you never can tell. Awesome. Guggenheim. Awesome. So and that's just one round, or kind of one round per se of the game. So it's really cool how much kind of can be created here just in that little course. So I'll take a picture of this, like I said, and I'll post this on social media. But we've already created, we've got a lot of druids that we've kind of established that have homes here, and we've created a conflict where they're battling with settlers over here. We've got this sort of ancient, almost mythology, I'd say, where you have these giants that existed at one time, and people have found these remnants of giants. But have people seen giants in years? Who knows? Will the players eventually run into one of these giant hermits? Possibly. So we've created a lot of world building just sitting here and rolling dice on a coffee spill map, and I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Highly recommend everybody checking that out. And once again, Chip, thanks for being on the show, and thanks for sharing your expertise. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's class. We hope you gained some new knowledge and ideas from our incredibly knowledgeable professors, which you can take with you to your table and implement into your games and sessions. If you enjoy what we're developing here at Session Zero University, then be sure to check out our lessons in practice by checking out various actual play episodes. We have tested and recorded a variety of games, systems, stories, and themes for your enjoyment, from Dungeons & Dragons to Powered by the Apocalypse to Kids on Bikes and more. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Session Zero Heroes podcast so you don't miss out on any of our future TTRPG content. Our show is available everywhere podcasts can be found, from Spotify to Apple Podcasts to YouTube, so there are plenty of places that you can follow and listen from. We encourage you to check us out on social media as well, whether you're prevalent on Facebook, X, Instagram, Blue Sky, or Discord. We're there, and we'd love for you to join our community. And if you're willing, we would truly appreciate you dropping a review on whatever platform you're listening to if it allows you to do so. Your feedback means a lot and helps others to discover our show. Thank you so much, and we'll see you for your next class at Session Zero University, run by the Session Zero Heroes podcast.